How's it going, guys? So today I'm going to make a video that was inspired by my buddy Nick, who has his channel called Motley Crue Forever One. He made a video that was called Top 20 Essential and Favorite Thrash Metal Albums. So I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to leave a link in the description so you can check out his video too. But I'm going to do a similar video, except I'm going to have 30 my top 30 essential and favorite thrash metal albums, just because I tried to narrow it down to 20 and I couldn't, so I'm just going to do top 30. Thrash metal being my favorite genre of metal, it was really difficult to narrow it down. So a couple things to keep in mind about this list. It's not going to be in any particular order except alphabetical. I didn't really want to have to rank them because that's going to make it even harder. I like too many of these albums too much to have to rank them. So I'm just going to go in alphabetical order. And then also I'm only going to have one album per band, because otherwise I would have had way too many albums. There's certain bands where I wanted to put like 3 albums by. So just one album per band. And then just keep in mind, this is, my essential and favorite list. So I'm not saying it's the definitive list of thrash metal or anything, but these happen to be what I consider to be essential and my favorites. So anyways, let's get started with the first one. This is Annihilator with Alice in Hell. This was from 1989, Canadian thrash metal band. I definitely consider this to be their best release, and it's a freaking underrated classic in my opinion. But I mean, songs like the self-titled one, the title track, Alice in Hell, Human Insecticide, Burns Like a Buzzsaw Blade, just great album, man. Just check this out if you've never heard Annihilator's early stuff, then just definitely check this out. The guitar work is insane on this thing. I'm gonna close these blinds real quick because of the freaking glare. Alright, so yeah, next up, I've got Anthrax. This is Among the Living. This was from 1987. Classic album right here. It's actually really hard to choose between this album and Spreading the Disease, because I like them both pretty much equally, but I went ahead and chose Among the Living as more of an essential album. I mean, everybody's probably familiar with this one, but if for some reason you haven't heard it, then check out the songs I Am the Law, Indians, One World. Great freaking album. Alright, so next up, got Artillery with By Inheritance. This one is from 1990. Artillery is a Danish thrash metal band. This is their 3rd full length. Yeah, classic, freaking awesome thrash metal album. I really like this album in particular just because of the the scales that they used with the songs. It's more of like a melodic feel of thrash metal, but it's got like a very Eastern sound to it. So yeah, it's very unique. I don't really think there's another thrash metal album that sounds like this. If you've never heard this album, check out the songs Comaniac, Bomb Food, the self-titled or the title track By Inheritance. Yeah, awesome album by Artillery. Alright, next up I've got this is Believer with Sanity Obscure. Believer is actually a Christian thrash metal band. This is their 2nd full-length album from 1990. They're just like a really heavy and technical thrash metal band, and super underrated in my opinion. So if you've never heard Believer, definitely check this album out. Everything about it is freaking awesome. It's one of my favorite thrash metal albums. The song Sanity Obscure, Wisdom's Call, Nonpoint, Idols of Ignorance, Dust to Dust. I mean, the whole song is just, the whole album is just freaking amazing. So yeah, check out Believer, Sanity Obscure. Their first album, Extraction from Mortality, He's another awesome album too. So I mean, check out Believer if you've never heard him before, and give him a listen, because you're definitely missing out on some underrated thrash. Next up, I've got Coroner. This is Punishment for Decadence. This one came out in 1988. This is their second full-length release. Coroner, they're a three-piece technical thrash metal band, I believe from Switzerland, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, they have a really interesting take on thrash metal. It's like really melodic and technical, and just yeah, just really different. So check this out if you've never heard it before. Alright, so next up I've got DRI with Four of a Kind. This one came out in 1988. This is technically a crossover thrash metal album, but so it's very punk influenced, but a very good album nevertheless. DRI is one of my favorite thrash bands as well. This whole album to me is just a perfect album. It's definitely DRI's best in my opinion. If you've never heard it before, just check out the songs, think for yourself. Just check that song out. It's definitely my favorite song by DRI. So yeah, DRI, Four of a Kind. Alright, next up I've got Dark Angel. This one is Darkness Descends, second full-length album that came out in 1986. A lot of people say that it rivals Rain and Blood, but I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's definitely a really good thrash metal album. If you've never heard this before, check out the songs Darkness Descends, The Burning of Sodom, and Merciless Death. Just an insanely fast thrash album, and also features Gene Hoglan. It's one of Gene Hoglan's earliest projects that he was involved with. So if you like Gene Hoglan's drum work, definitely check out Dark Angel. Some killer thrash. Alright, next up I've got Death Angel with the Ultraviolence. Don't really think this needs an introduction, but yep, this one came out in 1987. It's their first full-length album, and they're all still just a bunch of kids when they recorded this. Yeah, so if you've never heard the Ultraviolence, just go freaking listen to the whole album, because it's a thrash classic and needs to be heard. Grab some water real quick. Alright. Next up is going to be Demolition Hammer. This is Epidemic of Violence. This one came out in 92. So yeah, it's their second full-length album. Just a killer, brutal thrash metal album. It's probably one of the heaviest thrash metal albums, if not the heaviest one that I've ever heard. And if you don't believe me, go listen to it for yourself, because this album is freaking heavy as hell. Songs to check out: Skull Fracturing Nightmare, Human Dissection, and Omnivore. Those are probably my favorite ones. Another interesting thing about this album is the artwork. This artwork actually continues on, and like basically Obituary used the other half of this artwork for Cause of Death, and Demolition Hammer used the other half, which is this right here, for their album. So you can actually look that up and see like the full artwork, and it has both sides to it, which is pretty interesting. Alright, next up I've got Destruction with Infernal Overkill. This one actually is like the combo one. It comes with the Sentence of Death EP, which I really hate how they package this, because they put the Sentence of Death artwork on the front, and then they put the Infernal Overkill artwork on the back with like the track listing and stuff, and it just looks really stupid to me. But it's still, I guess it's still cool to have both of them, but I just wish that they would have packaged it differently. And then their inside just really plain. But I mean, anyways, Infernal Overkill is just another good album. I mean, it's obviously Destruction's one of the most popular German thrash bands. So yeah, check this out if you're into like any of the German thrash. killer album. That one came out in '85. Alright, next up I've got Evil Dead with Annihilation of Civilization. Just a great thrash metal album. Artwork by Ed Repka. This one came out in 1989. Evil Dead is from the LA area, and this is their first full length. If you've never heard Evil Dead before, just check out the title track Annihilation of Civilization, and you'll get a good idea of what they sound like. So check this album out. Alright, next up I've got Exodus with Fabulous Disaster. This is their third full length, their second album to feature Steve Zetro Souza on vocals. Yeah, it was actually really hard to choose an Exodus album because I kind of wanted to choose Bondo by Blood, and maybe a lot of people are going to say that I should have, but this one's my favorite Exodus album actually, so that's why I chose this one. I think just every track on this is just killer. So if you like Exodus and maybe you haven't heard this one, check out the title track Fabulous Disaster, Like Father Like Son, Verbal Razors, and The Last Act of Defiance. Those are probably some of my favorite tracks on this album. So yeah, check this one out, and this one came out in 1989 as well. Alright, next up, a really good thrash album, very underrated in my opinion. This is Heathen with Victims of Deception. This one came out in 1991. Heathen has like a really heavy and very technical take on thrash metal, almost like how Injustice for All is very technical and heavy. That's what it reminds me of, but in no way they sound like Metallica. But it's just that was just to compare how technical they are and stuff. But the vocalist is almost like a power metal style too. It's very melodic, and he actually sings, so that's another thing I like about this band. So I mean, if that sounds interesting to you, check this album out. It's their second full length. Their first one, Breaking the Silence, is pretty good too, but I think this one blows it out of the water. So check out Heathen with Victims of Deception. Alright, next up I've got Iced Earth with Night of the Storm Rider. This is their second full length, came out in 1991. Yeah, just this one I guess kind of borders, it's kind of, I consider it thrash metal, at least part thrash metal. It's kind of power metal too, but I'm not going to split hairs. It's got a lot of thrash in here, so that's why I included it in the list. Just check out the songs Angel's Holocaust and Pure Evil. Those are probably a couple of my favorites. Although this is a concept album, so I really do recommend listening to the whole thing. If you're not really familiar with Iced Earth, especially their earlier material, then start with this album. It's really freaking good. Perfect album in my opinion. Alright, grab some more water. Alright, next up, this is one of my favorite thrash metal albums. Well, I guess you could say that all of these are, but really one of my top ones. This is Kreator with Extreme Aggression. By far my favorite Kreator album. To me it's just perfect. Every song on here kicks ass. This one came out in 1989. This one I believe is their fourth full length. Songs to check out: Bringer of Torture, Extreme Aggressions, No Reason to Exist. I mean, you could pick any song on this album and listen to it and it's going to be good. So yeah, Kreator with Extreme Aggression. Alright, next up I got Megadeth with Peace Sells. This one came out in 1986, their second full length. It was really hard to pick a Megadeth album too, because I would have put Killing You Is My Business and Rust in Peace on there too if I could, but since I'm trying to keep it to one album per band, I chose this one just because it's probably my favorite just by a little bit. But yeah, I mean, classic album. What really needs to be said about this one? Yeah, if you've never heard it, go listen to it because you're missing out. Next up, another classic, Metallica, Master of Puppets. This album is pretty much the reason I started getting into metal when I was younger, and it's definitely my favorite Metallica album, and definitely my favorite thrash metal album of all time. Yeah, it was hard to pick between this and Ride the Lightning and even Kill 'Em All, but since this one's my favorite, I went ahead and chose Master of Puppets. I mean, what really needs to be said about this one? It's just an all-around awesome album. Alright, next up I've got Metal Church's self-titled album. This one came out in 1985. It's their first full length. And I know Metal Church is another band that they're not full-on thrash metal, but they've got a lot of thrash elements, and I think they had a big influence on the thrash metal scene, so that's why I went ahead and put this album in there. I mean, just a freaking awesome album. David Wayne's vocals, he's one of my favorite vocalists. So if you've never heard Metal Church, check out the first self-titled album, and then the second one, which is called The Dark. That's another killer one too. Alright, next up I've got Nuclear Assault with Game Over. This one was released in 1986. So yeah, Nuclear Assault, they're a thrash metal band from New Jersey, I want to say. Yeah, this is another killer thrash album. It's got a little crossover influence on there. So if you've never heard this album, just check out the songs Cold Steel, After the Holocaust. Yeah, just to name a couple. Radiation Sickness is another good one. But killer freaking thrash metal album. So if you've never heard this, you really got to check it out. Alright, next up I've got Overkill with Taking Over. This one came out in 1987. This is their second full length. This was another one that I had a hard time choosing for my list because I wanted to put Feel the Fire, but I like Taking Over probably just a little more. So I went ahead and chose Taking Over. A couple of good songs on this one are Wrecking Crew. Fear His Name is one of my favorites. So yeah, if you haven't heard Taking Over, definitely check this one out. Awesome freaking album. Alright. Next up, we've got Sepultura with Beneath the Remains. This one came out in 1989. Definitely think this is Sepultura's best album. I think Arise is pretty close too, but I like Beneath the Remains a little more. Just killer drum work. It's just the whole album is just intense, super tight. Just thrash metal at its finest. If you haven't heard this one, just check out the songs Mass Hypnosis, Inner Self, Stronger Than Hate. Those are just a couple, or just a few to name, but check that one out if you never listened to it. Alright, next up, I've got Razor with Violent Restitution. This one came out in 1988. I think this is their, I want to say their fourth full-length album. It might be their third, but I want to say it's their fourth. But yeah, just a great thrash metal band and just a great thrash album. Just riffs upon riffs in this thing. If you've never heard them before, check out the songs Hypertension, Enforcer, the title track Violent Restitution. Yeah, great album. Alright, next up I've got Sacred Reich. This is actually like a compilation that comes with their first album Ignorance, and then the Surf Nicaragua EP, and then some live stuff. So yeah, I'm choosing Ignorance to put on the list because it's one of my favorite thrash metal albums. So you can actually see the artwork right here. So that's the Ignorance artwork. I actually showed this in vinyl before too. So yeah, I mean, Sacred Reich to me is just a freaking underrated thrash metal band that I think anybody who likes thrash should hear. The song Death Squad, that's probably my favorite one, and then Violent Solutions, and then Victim of Demise is another good one. So yeah, if you've never heard Sacred Reich, go check out the album Ignorance. Freaking awesome stuff. Alright, next up I've got Slayer with Show No Mercy. Yeah, I know, I didn't put Rain and Blood. Probably gonna get some hate for that, but had to go with Show No Mercy because, I don't know, this is the first Slayer album that I really got into. And to me, it's like, even though it's their most like, I guess, their most raw album and stuff, it's very different from their later stuff. You know, this one's very melodic and catchy, and it's just an overall really fun album to listen to. Yeah, classic album. Not much needs to be said about it. I mean, I like Rain and Blood a lot too, but I went ahead and chose this one because this is my list, and this is my favorite Slayer album. Alright, next up I've got Sodom with Agent Orange. This one came out in 1989. I've got this like cool digipack reissue that came out not too long ago. Comes with like a live CD and stuff. I really like the back artwork too. But yeah, killer classic German thrash. Definitely my favorite Sodom album. Check out the song Tired and Red. Yeah, I'd just start with that. Great album. Alright, grab a little more water. Next up, I've got Testament with The New Order. This one came out in 1988. My favorite Testament album. I like this album so much just because I like the guitar work, the leads, and then I just like the kind of atmosphere that this album has. It just, I don't know. Definitely my favorite Testament album. Probably followed closely by The Legacy, but I just like The New Order a little more. So yeah, if you've never heard The New Order, check out the songs Disciples of the Watch, Trial by Fire, title track The New Order. Just freaking killer classic thrash album right here. Alex Skolnick on lead guitar. Alright, next up, this album right here, it's one of my favorite thrash metal albums, and it's just probably, to me, it's one of the most underrated. This is Toxic with World Circus. I recently showed this on vinyl as well. I mean, it's just very melodic and technical thrash metal. The vocals are like something you've never heard before, just very, very high-pitched vocals. I think that's what I like about Toxic so much, that and the lead guitars by Josh Christian. So yeah, if you've never heard Toxic, please go check this out. Just listen to the song Heart Attack, and just at least give them a chance, because it's an underrated album in my opinion. Alright, so I just got a few left. Next up I've got Violence with Eternal Nightmare. Also showed this one on vinyl recently. This is like the CD reissue. It comes with, I think, some live songs on there, which is pretty cool. But yeah, another thrash metal album that's like underrated, and it's got some unorthodox vocals, but if you can dig the vocals, then there's so many good riffs on this album. It's just riff after riff. So Violence, Eternal Nightmare, if you haven't heard it, go check it out, because you're missing out. I know I keep saying that about every album, but these are some really killer albums. Alright, so next up I've got Voivod with Killing Technology. This one came out in 1987. Yep, I mean, just what needs to be said about Voivod? They're so unique and different, and this is definitely my favorite Voivod album. If you've never heard it before, go listen to the title track, Killing Technology, Ravenous Medicine, Tornado. Yeah, just an overall really great thrash metal album. And last on my list, number 30, this is Whiplash with Power and Pain. Just another awesome, underrated thrash album in my opinion. This one came out in 1986. It's their debut full length. Then this CD actually is like a compilation one too, which comes with Ticket to Mayhem. So they put the Ticket to Mayhem artwork on the inside. This is how they should have packaged the Destruction one, because they have like the main artwork on the front, and then the back of the CD still looks like the back of the CD. So, but anyways, if you've never heard Whiplash before, just go listen to the song Power Thrashing Death. Give that one song a listen at least, because this album is freaking great thrash metal. Alright, so yeah, like I said, this is just my list. These are my favorite thrash metal albums and what I consider to be essential. So thanks for watching. Go ahead and comment if you have any suggestions, or tell me about some of your favorite thrash metal albums. I'm always looking to listen to some new stuff that I've never heard before. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it.